New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani has strong support among Democratic voters. But what about the party establishment? Last week, Mamdani won the backing of one of the most prominent Dems in New York State, Governor Kathy Hochul. I know that took a minute, right? But what took her so long? And why should voters even care? From WNYC, this is NYC Now. I'm Janae Pierre. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us. Governor Kathy Hochul is among the first major establishment Democrats to endorse Mamdani, whose progressive views have put him at odds with some elements of the party. As the general election looms, the governor's move puts renewed pressure on other high-profile Democrats, like House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. To unpack what this all means for the city and the Democratic Party, I'm joined by WNYC's John Campbell. And John, I just used the term establishment Democrat to describe Governor Hochul. Can you quickly explain what that means and how that sets her apart from other Dems in the state?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the governor is part of what we call the Democratic establishment. And what we mean by that are the people within the party who have traditionally been the base of that party and formed the leadership of that party. The leaders tend to be more center-left, which includes Governor Hochul, plus, like what you just said, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer. Those are the people that really make up the establishment. And when we talk about establishment Democrats versus progressive Democrats, the progressives tend to be more on the left flank of the party.
Got it. Thanks for breaking that down. Now, talk about the importance of the relationship between a mayor and governor, because I know historically there's been friction in decades past bordering on animosity, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all due to the way the government is structured in New York. I mean, New York City needs the state's permission to do just all sorts of stuff. Everything from putting up speed cameras in school zones to funding the subways and all sorts of funding issues in New York State. So there's all sorts of things where a mayor needs to go to the governor and the state legislature to essentially get permission. And that has really led to all sorts of friction between mayors and governors over the years. I mean, the biggest example was pretty recently, and that would be Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio. I mean, Janae, they fought over everything from, closing down subways during weather emergencies to even whether to euthanize a deer that was on the loose in Harlem. That was a thing. Yeah, that was a thing that actually happened. But, Governor Hochul has tried to have a better working relationship with the mayor's office, particularly Mayor Adams, who has been the mayor for almost the entirety of her term at this point. And that's in part why there was a lot of interest in what Governor Hochul was going to do here with Zohran Mamdani and the mayor's race. I mean, she's going to have to work with whomever the next mayor is. And there was some question about whether she would endorse Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee. He did win a Democratic primary after all. Or if maybe she would not endorse at all because, Mayor Adams is way down in the polls, has had issues about his ties to Donald Trump, whose administration helped disappear some criminal charges against the mayor. And then the other major candidate, I should say, is Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, who she had a pretty difficult relationship when he was governor and she was the lieutenant governor. But, she ultimately did decide to pull the trigger and endorse Zohran Mamdani.
So let's talk about that relationship between Hochul and Mamdani. Where are they aligned and where do they disagree?
Well, Hochul is very much a centrist Democrat. Mamdani is very much from the left side of the party. He's an unapologetic democratic socialist. And so Hochul made clear in her endorsement of Mamdani that there's still things that they don't agree on. That said, when a reporter pressed her to say one specific thing where you do agree with Zohran Mamdani, here's what she had to say.
Childcare. We already had a conversation about the fact that I announced my desire to get to universal childcare back in my state address. He's aligned with that.
And it sounds like they're in total agreement right there, though, John, right?
Yeah, it kind of sounds that way, right? But listen to this very next line that Governor Hochul said.
But you also look at the fact that if you do it in its entirety in 1 year, for New York City alone, it is a $7 billion price tag. I have to double that for the rest of the state.
even on an issue where they theoretically agree, this push for universal childcare, they're still not quite there on the details about how fast they want to ramp it up. So the governor says they're committed to hashing it out over the next year when the state legislature is back in Albany, but that assumes that Zohran Mamdani wins in November.
Stick around. There's more to come. John, back up for a second, because I'm wondering, why should voters care about endorsements in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, endorsements tend to get a lot of coverage from people like you and I,
Right.
Journalists, and people in the political bubble. You know, it's all they can talk about sometimes. But do voters really care? Should they care? I mean, sometimes, yes. I mean, in the case of a big national figure like an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has a lot of, very enthusiastic progressive supporters who kind of look to her for a stamp of approval. In those cases, sure. But I think an endorsement like Governor Hochul's probably doesn't move the needle nearly as much, but there's really big implications here for Zohran Mamdani and for Governor Hochul. I mean, on the Mamdani side, the governor's endorsement is really a signal to centrists and moderates and the Democratic establishment, there's that term again, that it's okay to support Zohran Mamdani, even if his views on socialism and any number of things are to the left of your own. And then there's the business community. The governor has a pretty good relationship with the business community in New York City, which has some factions that have been kind of freaking out over Zohran Mamdani and the potential that he could be mayor. But for Hochul, she's obviously banking that this is going to be a positive for her own reelection chances. I mean, like we said, she's up for reelection next year. She's hoping to court some of those Mamdani supporters, those very enthusiastic supporters that knock on doors, to her side and away from maybe a more progressive primary challenger like her own lieutenant governor, Antonio Delgado, who is already challenging her from her left.
You just wrote a piece last week about Republicans being eager to use Mamdani as a political foil. Is that what some of the other Democratic leaders are worried about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we just talked about that potential reward for Governor Hochul, but there's a lot of risk with this endorsement too, not just for her, but with any establishment Democrat. There's that term again. And the two names that we're really watching most closely are Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who you mentioned earlier. They are Brooklyn Democrats who live a few blocks from each other, but they are these national figures who lead their parties' respective conferences in the Senate and the House. And they want to see as many Democrats across the nation elected as they can. So they have to use this calculation of, okay, if we endorse Zohran Mamdani, then Republicans in any state in the country are going to say, hey, look, this socialist Democrat is who is the face of your party. And look, Chuck Schumer endorsed him. Hakeem Jeffries endorsed him. This is who you're electing if you're electing the Democratic Party. And while Zohran Mamdani is popular among New York City Democrats, or at least polls show us that he is in the lead among the New York City electorate, that doesn't play as well in other areas of the state and certainly some more Republican areas of the country or purple areas of the country. So there's a lot at play here for those national Democratic leaders to kind of figure out, okay, this is New York's Democratic nominee for the New York City mayoralty. Do we have an obligation to endorse him? Should we endorse him? Do we believe in what he's saying here? And the national side of things, which is this going to hurt our ability to take over the House, take over the Senate in the years to come here? That's what they're weighing right now. Neither of them have made an endorsement in the New York City mayor's race to this point.
Mm-hmm. We know Hochul has managed to keep up a working relationship with President Donald Trump. Just a couple weeks ago, she pleaded with him over a phone call not to bring National Guard troops to New York City. So, considering the president's strong reaction to her endorsement of Mamdani, how do you see the governor navigating that dynamic?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, in addition to the National Guard issue, they've met in person a few times, and they've negotiated on things like Penn Station and, an offshore wind project off the coast of Long Island, and then, natural gas pipelines that Trump wanted. And, Hochul, though, in public has been pretty strong against the president's agenda, against the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And this week, she said that Trump's efforts to, quote, put his thumb on the scale in the mayor's race was really the thing that sealed the deal for her endorsement of Zohran Mamdani. I mean, remember, Trump advisors have been trying to convince Mayor Eric Adams and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa to drop out of the race to kind of clear the field for Andrew Cuomo, which, the theory being if Andrew Cuomo has a one-on-one race against Mamdani, he can consolidate the anti-Mamdani vote and maybe make a race of this thing. And once Hochul actually made her endorsement, announced it in the New York Times, the president suggested he could actually try to withhold federal money from New York City should Zohran Mamdani win. I mean, could be transportation funding, that could be healthcare funding. There's all sorts of levers he could pull on the federal funding front. And Governor Hochul had a really strong reaction to that.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay, I mean, think about what is implied in that threat. That if one person is elected mayor and not a different person, that he's going to threaten to withhold federal dollars despite how much we send as New Yorkers into the federal coffers. He'll withhold it from us.
The governor said part of the reason she endorsed Zohran Mamdani is she thinks he'll stand up to Trump, and she's concerned that the other candidates may be compromised.
When you put all this together, what does this tell us about the state of the Democratic Party in New York right now?
Well, it certainly shows there's still a split between those centrist, moderate Democrats and the, left progressive Democrats. But Governor Hochul's endorsement is maybe one step toward unifying ahead of the November election. We do know that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have been talking to Mamdani and perhaps not the other candidates. Jeffries in particular has kind of sort of hinted that an endorsement might be on the way. He said, stay tuned. And that would have, as we said, national implications. So there's still this very clear split, but, Hochul's endorsement is one step closer to maybe mending that rift and showing that there is some level of unification, even though the governor has made plain to say that there are still issues that she does not agree with Zohran Mamdani on. And, she's talked about how she's talked with him about things like Israel and the need to reach out to Jewish voters, things of that nature. So it remains to be seen a little bit, but it looks like there's some mending, some unification happening within the party, and Governor Hochul's endorsement is a step toward that. And
maybe other endorsements will follow and come rolling on in. We'll see.
Yeah, well, that's certainly what we're going to be looking out for.
Yeah. That's WNYC's John Campbell. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you, Janae.
And thank you for listening to NYC Now from WNYC. I'm Janae Pierre. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll be back on Monday.